Welcome attendees, and we appreciate you joining us for this um, explanation of a cross-curricular project. Health science meets machine tool technology. It's a beautiful thing. My name is Rhonda Evett, and I am a health science teacher at the Anderson Institute of Technology in Anderson, South Carolina. Joining me is my co-teacher, James Fowler. He can introduce himself to you. Go ahead, James.
Hey, I'm James Fowler, Machine Tool Technology Instructor at Anderson Institute of Technology.
Great. Well, I'm going to just go ahead and jump right in. We have some limited time. We hope that you'll join us at the end of the presentation for some live Q&A. I will say that during the actual, while you're watching the recording online, Mr. Fowler and I will be in the chat room so that we can answer questions as we go. But we will be there on camera for some live Q&A should that come up. So I'll go ahead and open up our presentation. I do believe this presentation will be available to you individually, but that way you can have any of the links or you can have any of the supply list that we have. So this is just a story about a problem that I had at the beginning of this year. We've been face-to-face with instruction with students since September 8th, 5 days a week. So I teach health sciences, and in that I teach a lot of health science body systems, and I'm used to doing a lot of hands-on activities. I am used to the students really being able to get involved and see different mannequins that we have, and even take field trips to cadaver labs and such. And at the beginning of the year, I was really running around trying to figure some things out. And Mr. Fowler was a new teacher here at the Anderson Institute of Technology, and our rooms are pretty close by. We just kind of got to talking before school started, and then he helped me with a couple of things once school started. And as we chatted, I just kind of told him what my problem was. And I wanted to have some small little miniature torsos with removable organs. And I wanted the students to be able to have their own. And those are something that you can't find very cheap, very inexpensive per student. But, we had to do a lot of cleaning, and South Carolina was a hot spot for COVID. And so he said, well, this is what I've done. This is what I've done for years in the industry, was to use casting and molding and silicone, and, let's talk about it, let's work it out. So this is kind of what our problem was, and what I wanted. I was very frustrated. We were unable to travel a lot. And, Mr. Fowler was able to help me out with this. We're going to walk you through the process. I'm going to just kind of share with you a little bit about what I wanted. And then he's going to walk you through the steps we took. And, at the end of it, we'll kind of share what worked, what didn't, what we might do differently in the future. So I hope you enjoy it. The way we got started was first to, just ask for support. We knew that this was going to take money. Didn't particularly want to pull it out of our budgets if we didn't have to. Our Career Center is only 2 years old. We're finishing up our second year. And of course, last year we shut down halfway through the year. So, we're going to have some financial backing, but also this was going to take some class time. And I really needed to have them behind us if we were going to pull our students out of our classroom. And, I was going to have to twist around some of my curriculum. It didn't impact Mr. Fowler's as much because his is more hands-on project-based with his machines, but mine is pretty fast-paced. Little did we both know that everybody was going to really, really, really support this. And so I went ahead and put together a proposal for them that tied in the standards from both machine tool technology and health science. And they were more than supportive of what we did. I have a link here that shows you the actual model that we ordered. I'm not going to click on it because we are so limited in time, but you can probably search around for a better price on this. There is one that's a little cheaper that's called Mr. Body or something like that. And the silicone, we'll talk about that. Silicone really didn't bond well. And so this was a much more harder plastic that bonded well that he'll talk about. So, you're going to have setbacks no matter how well you think you know things. And so I think I went ahead and put my proposal in. This is just some screenshots of it. This is what I sent to our administration. It just had a little bit about what we wanted to do so that they could say, you know, sure, absolutely. Did tie in some safety assessments pre and post, mainly pulling out the MSDS because we had a lot of different chemicals and we needed them to know about the safety precautions. We needed to show that through this process, there was growth at the end. They did learn the body system as well. They were able to use the silicone properly and troubleshoot it, which we had to do along the way. So this is just for you to kind of see what I did. I'm going to turn things over to James now, and he's going to go over all of the supplies and what the process was. So, you know, go ahead and take off.
All right. Thanks, guys, again for joining the session. If you'll look at the next slide we've got is the supply list. It's pretty straightforward, except a couple things I need to point out. The solo cups need to be at least 16 ounces. Anything larger is fine. The electrical tape may go through more than one roll per student. The silicone, the urethane resin, and the flex foam, those were chosen by trial and error with a couple different other products that we use from Smooth On and Reynolds. Those seem to be the best fit for what we did. The silicone was chosen because you can pour it without having to degas it or vacuum, put it in a vacuum chamber to get all the bubbles out. It'll pour smooth. It'll not have any porosity in it when you cut it open. The urethane resin that we use to make the body parts out of the organs and such, that's a real fast cure resin, so we were able to get more parts per day. And then the flex foam worked the best for the torso with that density, and just seemed to give a really good end result. So we move over to the next slide. The first thing we had to do was we had to create boxes to surround all the parts with. So you can see the two girls in the top are laying out with a Sharpie marker on the Lexan the sizes that need to be cut on the bandsaw. So we arrange the parts within the box, and you want to have at least a 1/2 inch gap between the parts and the borders and top and bottom where you're pouring the silicone. That way you get a good rigid mold, so things don't flex or move, or everything casts better, everything's more to size, because the last thing you want is to make the torso one size and the mold be so flimsy and floppy that the organs don't hold their shape or turn out right. The boxes, we first tried some fiberboard product that we had here at school. Did not work good at all. Was not reusable, so we went with plexiglass, and I would recommend the plexiglass for all of it, because you can reuse it over and over again.
We also tried doing all of the organs at once, thinking that would help us produce them faster. And we ended up going to individual organ boxes.
Yep, it's better to do each organ individually in their own molds. So creating that, you can see the picture where we had them all laid out in one box early on. You need to take a small drill bit about the size of the toothpicks that you're using, and in the master part that you buy, that you purchase, you need to drill a couple small holes to let the toothpicks support the part, and that way you can suspend it off the bottom of the mold box and not have to pour the mold in 2 different stages. You can pour it all at once, take an X-Acto knife, cut them back apart, get the parts out, and then you can pour them. You can use hot glue to stick it to the bottom of the box. You can also use super glue, that's fine too. We just had a lot of hot glue on hand, so that's what we went with. The silicone, it mixes 1-to-1, part A to part B. It is okay to use slightly more part B. Part B is the catalyst that makes it harden and activate, or as I like to call it, kicking. So that's usually the industry term. When 2 components come together, you gotta let it kick. So make sure it's mixed thoroughly. Change cups, mix it. Change cups, mix it. Pour it in a real thin ribbon. Make sure it gets around the part good. If you need to, tap the box around, shake it lightly, just to make sure everything's surrounded with silicone before it starts to cure. This silicone cures in about 30 minutes. So depending on how much time you got class-wise, you may can cut them open and see what they look like. We let them sit overnight just to be on the safe side. I would recommend letting them sit overnight just to make sure that everything's cured good and it comes out like it's supposed to. After you get the molds done and taken out of the Lexan boxes, you need to take an X-Acto blade or hobby knife and cut around the outside of the mold. And when you cut around the outside of the mold, you need to make sure you go in a zigzag pattern. That way the mold goes back together only one way. So you cut the zigzag pattern on 3 sides of the mold, leave the bottom of the mold uncut. Once you get that zigzag pattern, you can go in and cut straight. So you'll just peel the mold apart, cut with the knife down till you get to the master part, and then you can pull that part out. Cut you a little round hole about the size of a pencil with the X-Acto knife. That'll give you something to pour with. And usually put that hole at the highest point of the part, so all the air will escape out and you don't get any air trap. If you start pouring parts and you see really, really, really shiny, flat areas, I mean, you got air bubbles somewhere. Because the silicone is going to take the texture of whatever master parts that you use. The resin needs to cure for about an hour at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. When we did this, it was cold weather, and it seemed to take a little longer for the stuff to cure. So depending on air temps, it's going to depend on how many parts you can get out a day. We normally got out 3 to 4 sets per class period. We run 3-hour classes here. So that was pretty much the rule of thumb for the day. If we could get 4 sets out, it was a good day. So, and we made 2 sets of molds, and it worked out good. And the next page you can see is a table full of torsos. We have little boxes that we separate the parts out in. When the parts do come out, you're going to have some flashing around the edges that will need to be sanded. You can also take a hobby knife and trim those back so there's not as much to sand, and then sand them and get them smoothed up and ready to paint. With these parts being molded in silicone, I would also recommend washing them in soapy water before you let the kids paint them. Do not wash the foam, because that foam will absorb the water and you'll never get it out of the part. It'll always just, every time you squeeze it, it'll, like a ball that you play with in the pool, water's gonna come out with it all.
We ended up making about 25 of these torsos and the organs to go with them. And so we split them up. I bagged them, that each of the kids got to write their name on them. And as I went through body systems, we, would add in, they would paint that particular organ, and then we would, get to add it into everything. I let them get a little, let them personalize it. This is some pictures of some of the students painting theirs when we first got them. And this is one of the finished products that was done the other day. Now, I will say, well, I have put here, this is the actual torso that worked. We'll tell you kind of in a second. The first one we used would not, I guess, it wouldn't harden with the other silicone organs that came with the other little model I ordered. These were, I think, 9-inch models. And then this is the actual mold that we made, or so you can see kind of it's pretty similar. The ones that we ended up not using, we did not mold the intestinal tract. We used clay instead because it just fit in better. These ended up being really hard, and which is what we had to do. This stuff the foam is real soft. This stuff is a lot harder than that. And so getting them all to fit together didn't work quite as well. So we used some of the diaphragms, which is kind of a top view of the diaphragm. We ended up using clay for those as well, just because it worked better. And, as you can see here, it did its job. The students really learned quickly about where organ placement was, and that I was wishing we had been able to do it earlier on. what didn't work, that we kind of told you about already. I had the other model at my house when we started talking about it, and we tried it with that, and it would just be real gummy. Is that, you said that it just wouldn't, was it compatible with that? Is that what you were?
The silicone we use is a platinum-based silicone. It's a very safe silicone to work with for allergy purposes. And we don't know if these kids were allergic to contact with this stuff and these chemicals or not. So we tried to take the safest route possible with all of the compounds that were used. And whatever that first model was made out of was some sort of rubber.
Yeah.
And it was a silicone type rubber, but there's two different types of silicone. There's a platinum cure and a tin cure. And if you mix the two together, they're not going to cure. Again, one's not going to cure against the other one. So I'm assuming that that's what that other rubber was, because the outside of the molds would be hard, but when you would get right there around the parts, it would just be uncured good. The Lexan worked a whole lot better making the mold boxes. The other thing about the Lexan that you can do also is if you say you want to make 3 or 4 sets of molds, once you get everything cut, you've got to take the Lexan boxes apart to get the silicone out. So with them being hot glued together, you can just heat them with a hair dryer or get them warm, or put them in a small oven. You can peel the hot glue off. Then you got a clean surface to use again, so you get a nice square mold that way. You don't have a bunch of gobs of hot glue built back up. We had a lot of delays early on. I'll let Ms. Evans speak a little bit.
Yeah, we're down to about, I think, 4 minutes left on our presentation. So I'll kind of blow through the rest of these and then see what's on the next slide. I had to quarantine 4 times for 2 weeks at a time. And then a lot of when I say South Carolina was a hot spot, I'm not kidding. We had 4 high schools, 3 districts feeding into our career center. Somebody was quarantining all the time. We wanted to start this in the fall. That didn't happen. We ended up starting it in the spring. We did reach our overall objective. We figured out some things we could do differently next time around, and also some things that would save other people time if they decided to do this. The students really built some great friendships, and it was just really neat watching them kind of all come together and work together. My kids really loved working on the big machines, and it was good for me to be able to show them biomedical engineering doesn't have to be so scary. So I think it worked well personally, because neither of us had to be the boss. He just took my vision and would work with it. And sometimes things we did were not quite what I had envisioned. And he was very patient with me. And, we all made it come together. And, I think one of the biggest things to take away from it is that, we've worked in industry for years and years. And it can get, when you get into an education setting, sometimes not having an upper level degree can actually hinder you from doing other things. And I think this is great proof for both of us, because each of us have an associate's degree. I have an associate's degree in respiratory therapy. I've been doing that for over 30 years, and I've done some great things and been in administration and leadership. And James has done the same thing. So it's really neat for us to be able to say, you don't have to have a PhD or a master's to be able to do cool things with your students. And for us to just, teach them that, you can use your imagination, and you can really have a good time with this and work well together. And, we are going to be presenting at the South Carolina Education and Business Summit on July 20th. We do, we're happy to discuss doing professional development or workshop for your program. We are in the process of talking about a symposium here in Anderson, South Carolina at our Career Center that has to do with this. And if you want more information about that, just email us at one of those 2. And anything you'd like to say in your own reflection, James, just kind of wrap it up, and anything you had to take away from it.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway I have is like Ms. Evans said, you don't have to have a master's or bachelor's or a PhD to do a project and be successful with it. I tell my kids all the time, if you can see it, you can make it. And run with it. If you got an idea, go with it. Don't be afraid to try anything once. So, and hope you guys join us for questions and answers later, and maybe even join us at the South Carolina Education Business Summit in a couple of days.
Awesome. Well, we do appreciate you for, we want to thank you for joining our session. You will automatically be awarded points for attending this session. At the end of the conference, you will receive a digital certificate noting how many sessions you attend. And we hope to see you during our live Q&A right after this. Thank you so much. We appreciate it and hope you enjoyed our little project.
All right, thanks, guys.